So, welcome to Everything's Connected. I'm here with Sarah. Welcome, Sarah. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Laura.
Um, could you briefly introduce yourself and what kind of work you do?
So my name is Sarah Cook. I am a creative mentor and writing coach. And basically, what those terms mean for me is I work really intimately, mostly one on one with folks and help them build and nourish their creative practices. Um, Within that umbrella, I would say, the work can look and feel so different with each person. There really is like a very intimate and tender and personalized aspect to this work. But what I generally tend to see are kind of two main tracks that lead people to me.
Yeah.
One is someone has a book that they're wanting to write. And so our container really is focused around this project.
Mhm.
That's what anchors our work together, and I'm helping them steward that project into existence. So a lot of spiritual, emotional support, but a lot of practical support as well. And in those cases, I'm reading people's pages and giving them developmental strengths-based feedback. But at least half of my clients come to me without a project in mind. And it's not because something's missing. It's almost like they're the project in a
I
way,
love
which like sounds kind of cheesy, but it's like
that.
feels so true. Like I work with people who, for example, are at like a really big transitionary point in their lives and they're trying to figure out like what does it look like to have their creativity be a part of their life, or something's changing and they want to understand the role that their creative gifts might be playing in that.
Mm.
Or in some cases I'm working with someone who has been really far away from the page for a long time, sometimes years and years, and they're just trying to get back there in a way that is sustainable and not dysregulating, and I'm helping them do that. So yeah, those are kind of the main things I see, and then just a lot of variation within that.
Great. No, I really love that idea of,
Mm,
I always say something like everyone's a work in progress. So
yeah.
we being projects sort of rings very true. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, what made you decide to become a creativity coach? And maybe you could share some of the things. I'm sure you've learned many, many things over the years.
Mm.
I don't know how long you've been doing this, but maybe what are some things that you've learned, what you've taken away from the work you do?
Yeah, what a good question. And I sort of I want to be really transparent. I wish I had a really glamorous answer for this. Like I from this moment in my life looking back, so I'm going into my fourth year of doing this work. I've been a writer my whole life. I've been devoting myself to creativity my whole life, but being in this role of being a creative mentor and being self-employed, I'm going into my fourth year of doing that. And from this moment looking back, what I see is, so I'm a late diagnosed autistic human, and I have basically curated a life that accommodates me in like a pretty remarkable way. I work from home. I get
Mm,
to be in control of the lighting, of the textures, of the things I use, of how I'm seated, of how often I
mm,
stand up and move around. I don't have to follow policies and procedures that don't make sense to me. I get to make choices about everything I do. I mean, I have a really strong sense of integrity and really like a like work ethic,
mm,
and I get to just let that drive what I'm doing, and that's all. It's really amazing, and I have a lot of gratitude for me 4 years ago for
mm.
putting myself into this position. But I have to say I had no idea that's what I was doing. And autism was not even on the table yet. I was still a social worker. I loved the work I was doing, but I was incredibly burnt out. The pandemic happened, which was like
Right.
building on the burnout. My agency was unionizing, which was like a wonderful thing and a very stressful and kind of traumatic thing as well. So I just kind of reached a point where I just, something had to change.
Mm,
And I will say the one quiet but clear thing that was guiding me was this sense of I didn't want creativity to be this like supplemental part of my life anymore. I hated the idea that I had like coworkers who didn't even really understand that I was a writer. Like that, there was something about that that just felt like, this, I can't abide by this any longer. So I think, it has been a strange and wonky and unclear path, but one that yeah, I think the neurodivergent piece really does feel important to me with all of this because it really, and I feel a lot of privilege and gratitude for being able to do this, but
Hmm.
there really is a sense of like, I'm trying to accommodate myself for the first time in my life.
Wow.
And it's pretty great. Um, yeah, you asked this great question too about what have I learned?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I guess the thing I'll say here is like, I've had quite a few people in different conversations ask me like, oh, well, when you're helping people with their creative projects, doesn't that sort of like take away from the energy you can give to your own? Like I've
Oh,
I've had people wonder about that. And I don't know that I ever assumed I didn't even really think about that going into this work, to be honest. I
yeah.
was never worried about that. It didn't occur to me. But something that I have definitely learned is no, it's the opposite. It's
Hmm.
like, and I think that's a great example of where we just assume like capitalism just gets into all of our thinking, right? So in my mind, I think, oh, that assumption that there's going to be competition,
Yeah.
that's capitalism
Yeah,
talking, right?
totally.
So what I have found is like, and what I've learned and what I'm continuing to learn is there's such a collaborative nature to creativity, and helping people with their own stuff only fuels my own
Hmm.
bucket, only inspires me, only like keeps me in that space and keeps the channel open for me. And that's been just a really lovely thing to witness.
Yeah, I imagine. And yeah, that totally makes sense to me. I also was like surprised when you said that people ask
Mm,
you this because I also never occurred to me. And I mean, I didn't know what your answer was going to be or your experience, but I
mhm,
also thought sort of intuitively, oh, if I had to guess what it would be, I would say no, it doesn't like experiencing and talking with other people about creativity. Wouldn't that fuel your own creativity? It's sort of that's immediately what makes sense to me, I guess. So, but you're
yeah,
totally right about capitalism just sort of ingrains this idea that everything has to be a competition. When we're good at
totally.
something, we have to compete with others. And I think I've heard other artists talk about this, and they sort of always say something similar to what you say. That
Mm,
I don't know. It's sort of like there are a lot of artists, I think, who believe that it's like I don't know how to say it's maybe not like the job of artists, but sort of part of being an artist is to help other emerging
mm,
artists, especially if you're very successful or if you like, find your place where you can do what you love to do,
mhm,
if you're lucky enough to do that. Um, that it's sort of part of what, yeah, makes you a true artist is to nurture community and to be part of an artist community. I feel like
mhm,
all of us as human beings have this need for community. And yeah, that helping to nurture other artists, those who are just starting out or have some sort of obstacles in the way to their creativity, like
mhm,
you do, that it's part of our work as artists to help each other and collaborate.
mm,
And yeah, also just, I don't know, I didn't really get to collaborate with other artists yet,
mhm,
but I've been working with some music therapists, and just that experience of like, me bring a poem and the therapist sort of trying to find a melody for that. I just remember I might have even talked to you about this when you
mm,
were my coach, I think, because it was
mm,
such a transformational experience for me. It felt like magic, and I just felt so understood, like really truly understood for the first time. I don't know, it was like wow, it was just my words, and I just described like my inspiration for that poem. It was about going for a walk through the forest on like the first day of spring and just this
Mm,
really inspirational energy with the sunset and the birds singing. And she sort of channeled that and just sort of transformed my words, exactly what I was meaning, into music. And I was just
mm,
completely baffled. So like,
yeah.
wow, I really feel like I want to do this for the rest of my life, like collaborating with other artists, because it really
Yeah,
is like magic. So yeah, I can just really
absolutely.
relate to what you're saying, that
Mm-hmm.
it must be such a joy to, and I guess also a privilege to witness other people's creativity and
Mm,
help them to
mm-hmm.
reconnect to that.
Yeah, yeah, so beautifully put. And yeah, I think you're exactly right. There is, you know, there's this myth of like, especially with writing, that it's like this lonely, isolating act. And yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah.
solitude that goes into it, but I wouldn't call solitude loneliness. And I also think there's like, yeah, as artists, like most of us are sensitive, we're community oriented, we're
Yeah.
hyper aware of issues of social justice. Like it is not a solitary thing. Even when I'm sitting at home by myself writing, there's a community somewhere that I am in dialogue with.
Yeah,
And so I think you're right that yeah, there's this just ultimately this like community collaborative aspect to creativity that is so important to it.
definitely. Well, I feel like I could just digress and stick with one topic and just forget all of my questions, but I have to focus. So yeah, another thing that I remember is that you introduced me to this idea of being in relationship with your creativity,
Mm,
which was something completely new to me and sort of blew my mind. And
mm,
I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about that and maybe explain what it means and
mm.
how it can help your clients when you're working with them, and maybe also how it has helped yourself.
Yeah, yeah, such a good question. Yeah, I want to say for me, because I think there are a lot of different metaphorical frameworks for how we might think of creativity. And for me, this one feels like almost like a slightly updated and slightly more interactive version of thinking about like the muse. So the muse has never, for me personally, really resonated, which is not to say that I don't think there's like a cosmic spiritual element to creativity, but just I don't know, the gendered aspect of it has never landed with me. And then also just the idea too that like we're waiting for something to show up.
Hmm.
Things do certainly show up that I have not conjured. And I do sometimes have that experience, but I don't think that means that we have to always wait for inspiration. I think we can play a bigger role in it. So this idea then that our creativity is something that we're in an active relationship with, I like thinking about, well, what are the things I do to tend any of the relationships that I care about? Well, I know that trust is important, trusting the other person. I know giving the benefit of the doubt is often really important with people I care about. I know there's this collaborative element that there are things I'm doing, but I'm also not the only thing present. Um, a certain amount of like kindness. So the other thing about this metaphor that I think has a lot of potential is we're just so hard on ourselves. So many
Hmm.
of us are so hard on ourselves, and there are ways that we talk to ourselves that we would never talk to a friend that way. So sometimes I think it's almost like the gift of this metaphor is like pleasantly tricking ourselves into being a little kinder toward ourselves, because my creativity is something, whether it's I want to personify it or associate it with a creature or just think of it as like a certain kind of spirit in my mind. If I think that there's this thing that is of me but isn't me, well, I'm not going to like be a jerk to that thing in the same way I'm going to be a jerk to myself. And so it creates a little bit of space where maybe we can start thinking about these things, trust, kindness, acceptance. And I think oftentimes when we're working with like how we regard ourselves, that little bit of space can sometimes be really profound, because just in that little bit of space we can start to get our footing around, okay, maybe there's like maybe I need more patience here. Maybe I can have a little more graciousness toward myself, even though I'm feeling frustrated that my work isn't good enough. Like maybe, if we turn that toward, well, what is my creativity having to say about all this? How's my creativity feeling? I think it can, yeah, there's like a pleasant trickery to that, I would say. Um, yeah, and that's at least how it has helped me at times, and I've seen that help clients as well.
Yeah, great. Oh, I like that. I know there's so much to everything you say that I want to comment
I
on.
yeah.
It will take ages. But it's so interesting to me because for me, it reminds me a little bit of the therapy work that I've
Mm,
done, like parts work, especially, you know,
yeah,
learn about your different personality parts and
totally.
all of your different parts as in relationship with one another. And that helps, like you said, it helps immensely with
Yeah.
self-compassion because even though all of these different parts are me and just, I'm a whole, complete whole, but we still, I guess most people have like an inner dialogue or an inner monologue, like there are different voices in our heads that are
Hmm.
competing,
Hmm.
and it can be really hard to know what is really my own true, authentic voice, what are just like recorded, remembered voices from other people or
Mm,
from the
hmm.
media or whatever. There's so many, and we are in relationship with all of them, and like I don't know. I just think it
Hmm.
makes such a difference to become aware of that and to tend to these relationships as we would to external people. So yeah, everything
Hmm.
you say just makes so much sense. And yeah, it's been helpful for me too. So
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think you're totally right too. Like I am decidedly not a therapist. I was a social worker, never a therapist. I'm in a lot of therapy, and I would also consider therapy to be kind of a special interest of mine. So I do like know a lot about IFS. And while I don't like practice that with clients because I'm not a therapist, I will say it comes up often because I end up working with a lot of people who are also doing parts work in therapy. And so there's something that's really like complementary about talking about creativity through that parts lens. And I
Hmm.
just find it really organic. I mean, I talk to people sometimes who don't know what IFS is, but people just say, a part of me wants this, but I'm kind of mad. It's like
Yeah.
this, there is something really organic about
Mm.
parts work that it lends itself to this creative work
Yeah.
quite well.
And yeah, it's so interesting because when you first read about it, I would imagine that a lot of people might think, oh, this sounds really strange to me. Like I've never heard about different personality
Hmm.
parts when it's just such a really natural part of our existence of being human and being an animal, a conscious animal. And
Hmm.
it just, when you explain it, it just makes so much sense. Like you act differently in different contexts. And
Hmm.
I guess, I don't know, maybe having an inner child is something that more people are familiar with, and
Mm,
that's a part. So it just makes really sense. And I'm not really that big on the different models that exist. Like even with IFS, even though it has this parts work, I feel like there are certain terms or just certain concepts that don't 100% make sense for me with my experience or
mm,
that
mhm.
really click for me. So for me, I never really worked with a specific model in therapy. Like um, I just I just like to call it parts work. It's sort of,
Mm,
and
mhm.
I don't really even look up if that's what IFS does or not. I just sort of took some ideas from different stuff that I read on the internet and came up with my own
Totally.
work. But I totally digress now.
But it's a good point you're bringing up, and also I imagine that being a helpful thing for people to hear who are like curious about therapy or just ways they can support themselves. Like this work is so personalized. It has to be because of
Mm,
context. You said that word context, and that
mm,
is like the word, right? It's context matters. And so some things are going to land with you that won't land with me, and vice versa. And that's not a thing to fix, it's
yeah,
just a thing to accommodate.
yeah, exactly. So there's that word you used before, accommodate. So that's really important too. It's
Yeah.
really all about the individual person.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's already my last question. So how are we with time? Oh, pretty good. So you're also a trauma-informed coach. That fits what
Yes.
we've already been talking about now. So maybe you can talk a bit more how you support clients who have trauma and who especially might be restricted in their creative expression because of
Mm,
trauma.
yeah, such a good question. Um, Truthfully, I think one of the biggest ways I support clients with that is we're working together at a pace that is 100% in line with their nervous system, with their capacity. Like, slowness is a gift and is important, and just being slowly and carefully, by which I mean like in a full of care way, with exactly where they're at. Um, so, I usually work with people for at least a few months at a time, ideally like 6 months or longer, so that we can really just get a sense of where they're at, what's informing where they're at, and how they're regarding themselves, and then move at a really like luscious and luxurious pace that allows self-trust to start to be rebuilt. And I think
Yeah.
there's just no doing that work faster. And I think in so much of our life, we're in situations where there's deadlines or there's time limits or there's expectations. And
Hmm.
so I do think it can be a gift of these coaching containers where there is no expectation around that. We have time, we can like revisit ideas, we can, so just really moving at a pace of safety, I would say, like that feels really important. um the other thing that I think is really important when it comes to being trauma informed is also the mindset that we adopt as practitioners. And so for me, part of being trauma informed is I'm making the assumption, like I'm choosing to believe, and this feels unshakable in me. I'm choosing to believe that every single person I work with is resourced, has wisdom, and is capable, whether or not they know that about themselves yet, and whether or not that feels immediately accessible. Maybe for a lot of reasons, because of what they've been through, their wisdom doesn't feel very accessible to them right now. Okay, that's okay. That's super reasonable. But I see it as a part of my job to trust that it's in there
Hmm.
and to be really curious about it and to support us and to support the client with getting curious about it as well. So I think that's just, that's an assumption that I don't like, part of me feels like I don't know how I could be trauma informed and not make that assumption about everybody's innate capability. And I think
Hmm.
that's a big part of it. I really think that's a big part of it.
That sounds really good. I feel like my nervous system is getting soothed just from hearing you say those
Mm.
things. So
That's so
it
wonderful.
sounds very true. And yeah, there are so many things in there as well. Like curiosity is something that I've learned is so important in my trauma recovery. And what was it in the beginning that you said? Yeah, just that you have this belief. I also think for people with trauma, it's so important to have someone who believes that, who has like this positive belief about them, which they probably didn't have before. S- So
Mm,
that's like a large part of the trauma. And then it's like, for me, with my therapist and different coaches that I've worked with, it's like such a corrective experience, which is
mm,
so an important thing to happen
mhm,
in healing. So basically, that means like we need to have certain experiences, positive experiences when we grow up that we need to have them in order to develop and to grow as people. Um, such as having emotional support. And I think that having this belief, this kind of positive belief in someone is such a corrective experience. And it's one of those
Mm,
things we need to have in order to develop and grow. So
yeah.
I can totally see how that would help clients to move forward, move through their stuckness, if that's something they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also help foster self-compassion. It's like you need to
Mm,
see it being modeled, like someone being compassionate and to you and patient with you, not pushing you. And then you can learn to do that ourselves because yeah, I think you've also mentioned that a lot of the time we have like that inner critic, and we adopted
mm-hmm.
that. This world that's constantly pushing us, we adopted that, we
Yeah.
soaked that up, and um, yeah, it doesn't help with creativity really, or with anything else
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, it's stifling. I think it's stifling. And it's, again, to go back to the parts work, it's like, okay, that inner critic is doing its best. It's trying to protect us, but can we greet it with more compassion and curiosity without it being like in the driver's seat,
Yeah,
you know?
totally. Okay, so I think, yeah, as I said, I could go on, but I think I need
Yeah.
to keep an eye on the time that I don't want to be cut off.
Totally.
So maybe we can move to the last part of this interview,
Yeah.
which is reading a poem. So you were so kind as to bring a poem, and I brought
Yeah.
mine. So maybe you wanna read yours. Maybe tell
Sure.
us what it's about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I will say, so I'm going to say this is a poem in progress.
Okay.
There's always something a little nerve-wracking about reading something that doesn't feel finished, but I also think that can be an exciting experience too.
Mm.
And I'm calling it seasonal poem, and I don't think I'm going to say much more about it. I think I'm just going to go ahead and read it.
Okay, go ahead.
Seasonal poem. I put every single word in a blender: green, yellow, orange. Previously, there were two more stanzas, 5 lines apiece, and full of sound effects. I cut the inefficient. Take this opportunity to imagine what words sound like all mixed up, dear reader. Pulpy. The sound of everything all mixed up: words, feelings, anything harvestable, is what it sounds like right before you say something true. The point of writing poetry isn't to say everything at once, but to excavate the sounds of the trees that aren't yet talking.
Wow. That was really beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
I think, yeah, I think I would have to like have it in front of my eyes and read through it again and again in order to like,
Totally. I'm like that
yeah.
too.
But I really love the last line, excavating the trees that aren't yet talking.
Mm,
Was it that?
thank you. Yeah, I do think I tend to be drawn to nature and humor and something that maybe verges on a little bit surreal in some of my poems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really, I don't know. Yeah, I really love that because when it's surreal, it has sort of like a dream-like
Mm,
sense to it, and it
hmm.
might not make sense in that it's like not something realistic, but I think that sort of fits how, you know, dreams don't necessarily make sense, but they make sense in an emotional, subconscious way or in a metaphorical way. So
Totally.
I really like having that in poetry or in art in general. And
Hmm.
also, I think in the beginning you said something that it was a little bit surreal. I don't really
Mm,
remember it. Yeah, you're talking about the colors and the words, and
yeah. putting words in a blender. I mean, I guess that's a little bit
Yeah.
surreal.
I don't know, I really like that. And it sort of reminds me of I have synesthesia. So
Mm,
I like mixing different what is
yeah,
it? Sensory perceptions. So like hearing colors. That's not something I do, but that's like an
yeah,
example. So
yeah.
your poetry, when I've also been reading it on Substack, it always reminds me a little bit of that
Mm,
kind of experience, like smelling colors or
hmm
associate certain colors with certain words and stuff like that.
hmm
I don't know, that's something
Thank
I really like
you.
about your poetry because you do these
Oh,
surreal things of mixing things like you said in your poem, mixing things. So
yeah. Thank you so much. That feedback really pleases me. That makes me really happy. Thank you.
I'm glad. Okay, here we are again for the second part of our interview with some technology problems, but we persevere. So yeah, thank you for reading that poem.
Mm.
There was another thing that I wanted to mention, which I liked. Oh yeah, maybe you can read that line again about poetry is not about something something about poetry, which I really liked.
Yeah. Um, the point of writing poetry isn't to say everything at once, but to excavate the sounds of the trees that aren't yet talking.
It was perfect that just I don't know if you heard it, but in the background someone was like banging their cooking spoon against the pot.
Oh, I love it. I didn't hear that, but that's perfect.
They were applauding. No, I really love that.
Thank you.
They're really insistent. Well, okay, my mind is scattered now. If I had more concentration, I could say more lovely things about your poem, but thank you so much
Mm,
for sharing it.
thank you. Thank
Maybe
you.
you can send it to me as a text so I can,
Mm, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
that would be awesome.
Yeah, happy
So yeah,
to.
I'm just gonna read my poem.
Cool.
It's also about creativity. So, okay. It's called A Love Letter to My Creativity. The seed of me which survived every winter and every comet, cradling life in its arms, always carried you as well. You are a part of me, as much as my smile, as much as my voice. You are that sacred breath the ancients knew, the breathing in, the inspiration, the hour when rising from a cauldron deep, drunk as mead, and sung about in song. The power divine within me that turns me alchemist, shapeshifter, sorceress, transforming destruction into creation, pain into solace, and drought into tears. The joy, the playfulness, the curiosity I had to trade for survival as a child, I do now reclaim. My voice is my own, and you, my creativity, are my lungs.
Mm. I'm just remembering when we worked together how much I enjoyed getting to hear you read. You just have such a tremendously wonderful reading voice.
Thank you.
Um, also, I love that you read a poem that is an example of this relationship, right? This like relational
Yeah.
piece with creativity. That, yeah. Can I ask, is this a newer poem? Is this?
It's no, it's not very new. It's from last year. It's from November last year.
Mm,
So relatively,
cool.
new, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So lovely. Yeah, I really admire, this will be something you've heard me say before, but I really admire the way you have this ear for like the music of language. In a way that it's like, well, yeah, when we're writing lyrics or maybe doing spoken word or slam poetry, there is this
Hmm.
musicality, but I think even with just a poem like this, there's always a sonic emotional aspect to it. And I just feel like you're so good at hearing that and choosing words and turns of phrase that just amplify the music that can be found in any poem. It's
Yeah,
just, it's really skillful and it's really impressive.
thanks. That really means a lot to me because I definitely pay attention to that when I write the poem. And
Mm,
I try to like, I know it sort of comes naturally to me that that's what I want a poem to be like, to sort
mm-hmm,
of, I mean, I never before I was working with you, and also my therapist has said this. I have read poetry to her before, and she's like said the same thing. And before that,
mm,
I didn't realize it. I just always knew that I love language and playing with it. And yeah, I think it was also when I first read the first time that I read a poem to you when we were working together,
mm,
and that was the first time I read a poem to anyone ever. So
mm,
I will
mm.
always remember that. It will always be special to me. Um, how empowered I felt reading my poem out loud to you, and that I had this intense pleasure and joy that I derived from reading it out loud. And like, I guess I was feeling this musicality of the language and the melody, and thinking about how should I, what should I emphasize? How do I pronounce certain words? And I guess I just felt the rhythm of it. And that's what
Mm,
I derived so much pleasure and joy from, and which is like, different when you just read it. I mean, of course, you sort of hear the words in your head,
yeah.
you imagine them a certain way. Um, but obviously, when you actually do it out loud, then it's sort of really amplified. And I guess that's when I also realized, okay, I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to read my poetry out loud. I feel like that's really what my poetry is for. And I
Mm,
feel in general
mm-hmm,
like poetry is meant to be spoken out loud.
mm, mm-hmm,
Um, but yeah, that's something that is sort of really important to me. And
mm,
it also feels very true and feels very validating because I've only just started to excavate, to rediscover
mm,
my
mm-hmm.
musicality, which was like completely suppressed my whole life because of trauma and abuse. So
Yeah.
this is like one piece that perfectly fits into the whole puzzle of me, which makes me realize, okay, I really am a musical person. This is like
Yeah.
part of who I am and really is a gift that I have because
Yeah.
it's so hard for me to actually believe that. And I never was able to believe that my
Mm,
whole life that
mm,
I
mm-hmm,
have a gift with music. So
mm, mm-hmm.
it's so validating to hear that and to have
Yeah.
others reflect that back to me. Yeah, and then experience it myself, I guess.
Yeah. It really comes through. And it does, it has this quality of like such craftedness and such skill and this feeling that like, oh, but I bet it's in your bones too. Like part of me is like, I bet you also can't help but write this way. And
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
mean that as a compliment. Yeah.
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 Wow. What a wonderful interview. Thank you so much.
Yeah. This was
Um,
delightful.
I don't know what to say. Thank you.
Thank you.